Dan to Dan, episode 4. And I gotta say, as weird as this show's getting, it only keeps getting better. Let's talk about it. All right, guys, here Brandon back here for Geek Variants. Cover all things Marvel, DC, Lord of the Rings, anime, gaming, Star Wars, and more. This time, Dan to Dan, episode 4. And we need to start with the main talking point here. And just asking for a friend here. And be sure to hit that like button so we can post this question all the way out to the wonderful folks out there in Japan. Everybody there aging that well? Because yeah, I'm sure the internet's all asking the same thing, but Momo's granny for being 80, phenomenal. Absolutely shocking. It was one thing when you had Bulma from Dragon Ball Z or Tsunade from Naruto, but now we're adding granny on top of this. Weird list. But anyway, we started this episode kind of learning about Momo's grandmother and kind of what she does for a living. And it turns out she's a TV psychic who is actually quite good at her job, even though initially the idol that she was interviewing was lying about everything going on. And for those that are unfamiliar, idols are a huge thing over there in Japan or even in South Korea. Idols are kind of their version of our celebrities, but they're viewed more almost in like a deity light than what we have for our celebrities out here. It's like while we like actors and actresses at times, idols are held to a significantly higher standard and are basically almost revered out there. So for her to be out here, revealing big hidden truths about these idols and making all these waves, not a very popular decision, but one I'm sure she's going to stand by 1000%, just to be perfectly clear upon. But like as she's kind of going back home, she senses everything's going weird at her house and ultimately tells the driver who was trying to be nosy about trying to get a free reading because I mean, come on, man, why? Time and place, time and place. She's like, "Hey, if you don't leave, you're probably gonna die." Ultimately, she finds and stumbles upon Okaroon, who is fully transformed by Turbo Granny. Ultimately, she easily outclasses Turbo Granny on her home domain, which we'll talk about later on. But again, being able to barrier her, basically set her up in a trap, have a metal bat, and just wail on Turbo Granny, kind of made things fairly easy. And ultimately, saw that it was a very, very one-sided fight and that they do have some history together, but nothing to where we would call it a rivalry. It's very much just they've met, they don't like each other, they've moved on in their own separate ways. And as far as things are concerned, Granny looks like she definitely knows everything that she's talking about and more. She's someone who's going to be our wizened, grumpy elder. Think maybe Jiraiya, but significantly less perverted from Naruto, and maybe even Kakashi to some extent, but again, minus the perversion. But with everything going on here, we were able to kind of see that we have Momo waking up or Asayase, and she was kind of like looking for Okarum because she was desperately looking for him. Because I think ever since she figured out his name, if Ken, I think there's been more of a connection than friends traditionally have. And now she's going to look for Okarum. She's looking because she wants to go apologize, make sure he's okay. She ultimately has to get this information out of her grandmother, who, let's just say, not on the best of terms. Ultimately, she goes down on all fours, head down, and apologizes, which is the ultimate sign of respect and the ultimate sign of an apology. So she was able to speak with her grandmother, who was like, "Hey, go check, the main area out back." Ultimately, going to the main shrine out back, we see that Okaruna is not only alive, opposite of what Granny says, but he's just out there having some rice balls, having a good old time with himself, just kind of enjoying his life. And is just like, "Hey, what's up? I'm so happy to see that she was okay." Because ultimately, where he left off, he wasn't even sure that everything involving Momo, that she was going to be fine. Because the last he saw of her before he transformed was her passing out after pulling out that huge dub against the sumo alien. Because that's that's a thing, I guess. And ultimately, we were able to kind of go ahead and get a little bit more backstory. Granny fills us in that Turbo Granny used to be known as the 100-kilometer Granny, and she was kind of revered in her area as a younger yokai, and that she was a monster who has been able to just basically transcend a lot of different areas, and she would just go around ravaging areas, doing her thing, which, as you know, her being obsessed with, the male region as she is considerably a problem for the population of Japan. And eventually she ended up getting sealed off or at least warded off, and unsure by who, or if she chose to go ahead and do so inside of that tunnel. Unfortunately, there was also a spirit already nestled into that particular area. So Turbo Granny and the spirit that resided within the tunnel decided to merge or have some kind of fusion, ultimately powering them up to the point that even Granny, who is our resident expert at removing these things, has to walk on in and be like, yep, can't do anything about this. Too strong, too powerful, and it's outside domain. And her domain is everything that is in the area of Kamigawa City. Everything there, she borrows her power from the god of that area, and you kind of have to take it as a sport, if you will. When you're winning, you want to play at home. Every time you want to play at home, so you can have home field advantage. Your fans root for you; they're louder than everybody else. Therefore, you're able to win more games that way, ideally. But again, being in Kamigawa City, she needs her god on her side to be rooting for and to help give her powers. If she goes outside that particular area, she's weak and would get absolutely throttled. The same, luckily, works against Turbo Granny. While she's within her domain in that tunnel, she is insanely powerful and going to be a huge threat for both Okaroon and for Momo. But if they're able to draw her outside of that perimeter in a race and kind of, get the jump on her, ultimately they'll be able to win and get everything going on. Unfortunately, Turbo Granny is able to hear everything going on because she's able to hear directly through Okaroon's thoughts, much like Naruto's tailed fox Kurama was able to hear what's going on in the outside world and kind of make a selective decision on whether or not he wants to appear or just be completely uninvolved with the events of what's going on. Think of it as someone just like your mental inner thoughts, the monologue that you're having, even though your outside is also perceiving what's going on. So we're stuck in this weird predicament where I felt we were going to gear up for this training montage, but again, Dan in typical fashion decides, nah, there's not going to be time for a training montage. And while Okaroon, of course, is trying to race everybody to go ahead and have a good old number 2, he ends up getting possessed by Turbo Granny because, well, Asayase or Momo looked away for just long enough for Granny to activate not only her curse, but also break through the barriers in the house, take out the other Granny. Well, take out, I should say, remove her mentally from the picture and cause her to start bleeding and be like, look, you're going to meet me at the tunnel tonight. We're going to handle things now, and we're going to go ahead and get this finalized and over and done with. If you want anyone to live or for the entire countryside of Japan to be on your hands, because I'll use Okaroon to curse everybody, you will meet me there tonight. Strong ultimatum, so of course they end up going in traditional garbs, and Granny has a sentimental moment with Momo, who is in turn fired up to go ahead and avenge her grandmother and go ahead and make sure that ultimately she is not going to be put in any more danger moving forward, because as much as Momo pretends to be tough, she's a big old softie for the people she cares about, which at this moment in time is Okaroon and her grandmother. We leave them heading on the train, but ultimately she changes out of the gear that she needed to be ultimately wearing because looking cool makes her feel like she's ultimately fired up. Interesting choice, but again, we'll see how it pays off her next week as we'll meet them in the tunnel for the big showdown involving Turbo Granny and Okaroon and Momo. Those are my thoughts on the breakdown. Be sure to hit the lovely red subscribe button if you made it to the end of the video. Help us get to 1,100 and continue to watch all of our videos as we are very, very close to being monetized. Thank you so much for all of your support. We cannot do it without you. I've been Brent for Geek Variants. I'll see you in the next one.